Thank you so much, Dulce. Now I'd like to turn it over to Nicolás Espíritu, who's a staff attorney with the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund.
My name is Nicolás Espíritu. That's Nicholas. Last name is Espiritu, and I'm with the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. We're proud today to stand with Dreamers who, despite the federal government's decision to recognize and authorize these Dreamers' presence with deferred action, have been once again attacked by Arizona, who has decided to implement policies that attempt to contravene this national policy. What Governor Brewer's latest actions highlight is that incalcitrant states and localities will ignore the political zeitgeist, which has demonstrated that our communities and the people of this country have rejected precisely these kinds of attacks. What Governor Brewer's latest attacks also demonstrate is that DACA, while providing a temporary answer to some of the critical issues facing these undocumented youth, these former undocumented youth who now are authorized to be here, is that merely authorizing these Dreamers' presence is not the ultimate solution. Instead, we need a permanent, humane solution that allows for full, not partial, not temporary, and not second-class status for these individuals. We now have the opportunity at the federal level to pass real, humane immigration reform for these Dreamers and their families and their communities. And we're proud, once again, to stand today with individuals and groups like ADAC who are going to be instrumental to bring about this change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicolás. So I'm just going to make some very quick comments in Spanish and then we will open it up to questions and answers. Estamos aquí hoy, mi nombre es Alessandra Soler, directora ejecutiva de la Unión Americana de Libertades Civiles. Estamos aquí hoy representando uno de los más inteligentes, ambiciosos y talentosos miembros de nuestra comunidad, los Dreamers y la coalición, el Arizona Dream Act Coalition, que están aquí representando como demandantes hoy. Los Dreamers han recibido un salvavidas temporario contra la deportación, pero que se encuentran ahora en el centro de una pelea entre el Estado de Arizona y el gobierno federal sobre inmigración. Hoy nuestros grupos, la Unión Americana de Libertades Civiles, National Immigration Law Center y MALDEF, con el law firm aquí de Post-Emily and Schuchart, iniciaron una demanda contra el gobierno del Estado de Arizona sobre una orden de la gobernadora Brewer negándole licencias de conducir a estos jóvenes que ahora tienen el derecho, bajo las leyes de migraciones federales, para trabajar y vivir aquí en los Estados Unidos por 2 años. Esta orden no es solamente inmoral, sino inconstitucional, porque es en contra de las garantías constitucionales que prohíben que el gobierno discrimine contra las personas simplemente por su estatus migratorio. Este es otro ejemplo del Estado de Arizona rechazando soluciones prácticas del gobierno federal, pero desafortunadamente en esta instancia la gobernadora Brewer está jugando política con los sueños de los líderes que están aquí hoy.
Okay,
so I'm going to now turn it over to
let's talk about you. We got a lot of nice philosophy here. You've got two basic claims here: equal protection and essentially federal supremacy. The latter seems to say you can't discriminate based on alienage. Are you telling me that states can have no difference in policies based on whether a person is in fact a citizen, a lawful resident, as opposed to somebody who's simply on deferred action?
What Arizona is doing right now is they're granting and issuing driver's licenses to every immigrant who has been granted deferred action except for Dreamers. So what we're saying is that the state of Arizona cannot discriminate in that way and single out and target only Dreamers and deny driver's licenses to them.
Okay, but that goes to an equal protection argument. Well, let's stay there for a minute. the argument has been that the other deferred actions were specifically authorized by Congress. This is something simply done by the President as an administrative act saying, we're just not going to prosecute them. Is there no difference in the deferred actions?
The federal government has been granting deferred action to different groups of non-citizens for decades. And there are, in some situations, in several statutes in which Congress has recognized that the federal government has power to grant deferred action. But the federal government has granted deferred action to numerous groups of immigrants, including many immigrants who are not specifically mentioned in any statute with respect to deferred action. Congress knows that the federal government does this. The federal system, Congress has granted to the executive branch discretionary power, prosecutorial discretion to decide the manner of the enforcement of the immigration laws. The federal government has power to do this, and there is no difference between the deferred action that Dreamers are getting and that every other non-citizen who has been granted deferred action is getting.
Which still leaves my original question. Is there no situation in which a state government can, I'll use the term, discriminate in the legal sense versus the moral sense, whether a person is in fact a citizen as opposed to somebody whose deportation has simply been deferred? Is it nothing that you can do, the whole alienage question? There's no power of the state to differentiate?
Federal law contemplates certain situations in which the states can rely on immigration-based classifications. And the U.S. Supreme Court has said that if the federal government has given the states direction or classified immigrants in a certain way, the states can follow that direction. But that's not what Arizona is doing here. The main point here is that what Arizona has done is it has rejected the federal government's decision to authorize these amazing young immigrants to live in the United States. And Arizona doesn't get to do that.
But the Homeland Security folks themselves...
They're available.
Okay,
They're available.
but...
We just want to open up to other questions.
But these are obvious questions. The Homeland Security people themselves...
And she'd be happy to, she's going to be available. They're all going to be here to do sort of follow-up questions.
Which other states have similar policies? I know the lawsuit addresses that. Do you guys know which states have these similar policies?
In the overwhelming majority of states, Dreamers with deferred action, just like everybody else with deferred action, are eligible for driver's licenses as long as they have work permits and social security numbers. We're only aware of 3 states in which, including Arizona, in which the states have announced an intention to deny driver's license situation in those states, but we have not filed suit in those states.
And also, just to be clear a little bit, when you say other non-citizens, undocumented immigrants under deferred action, in what cases have people gotten deferred action other than the Dreamers?
There have been people who are victims of domestic abuse or domestic violence, students who have been affected by Hurricane Katrina. Those are 2 big groups.
What if the state says we're not going to give driver's license to anybody that is in this process? Would that still be a constitutional violation?
You have an equal protection problem with that.
So, if I understand your question right, it's if they're not going to give driver's license to all deferred action
if they decide to do it, yeah.
We would argue, and we believe that still contravenes the federal government's decision that anyone that receives deferred action is authorized to be here, and if they authorize, once again, social security numbers and work permits, then it would just like Arizona's current policy, contravene federal law.